At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1942, Captain Paul Gunn ducked beneath the wing of a Douglas A-20 Havoc at Eagle Farm Airfield near Brisbane. Mechanics worked inches from him, welding 50 caliber machine guns into the bomber's nose, right where the bombardier used to sit. Gunn was 43 years old, with 2 decades of Navy service behind him, and a wife and 4 children held in a Japanese prison camp in Manila. Meanwhile, the 5th Air Force was burning through bombers faster than replacements could reach the front. In July alone, the 3rd Attack Group had lost 11 A-20s trying to attack Japanese shipping from high altitude. The bombardiers couldn't land hits on moving vessels, and when they dropped lower, Japanese deck gunners tore them apart. Captain Ed Larner had watched 3 of his crews go down in flames in the Coral Sea just a week earlier. Japan was reinforcing New Guinea whenever it wanted. Gunn had a different plan. If bombers dropped low enough to skip bombs across the water, the way you'd skip a stone, they could strike ships from point-blank range. But there was a catch: they had to make it through the approach alive. That required crushing Japanese deck gunners with overwhelming forward fire. The solution: turn the bombers into low-level strafers. The A-20's stock armament wasn't enough. Its 4 nose-mounted 30 caliber guns barely scratched ship armor. Gunn needed 50 caliber firepower, 4 of them firing straight ahead at a combined 1,700 rounds per minute. General George Kenney, the newly arrived 5th Air Force commander, gave Gunn 1 week to make the idea work. Gunn scavenged 50 caliber guns from wrecked P-39s and P-40s that would never fly again. The pilots were gone, but the guns still worked. He bolted them into a steel frame inside the A-20's nose compartment. Each weapon weighed 64 pounds, plus 200 pounds of ammunition. The added weight pushed the aircraft's center of gravity far forward, so much that the first test flight nearly killed the pilot. The A-20 barely climbed and kept wanting to pitch downward. Gunn spent 2 straight days rebalancing the airframe, shifting gear aft and adjusting the tail trim. The second test pilot came back shaken, saying the plane flew like it was angry, but it flew. On September 12, 16 modified A-20s struck the Japanese airfield at Buna at treetop height. Their guns ripped through buildings, aircraft, and anti-aircraft positions. 14 Japanese planes were destroyed on the ground. 0 A-20s were lost. Kenney wanted more, but the Havoc had limits: short range and a small bomb load. Gunn needed a bigger platform. He needed the B-25 Mitchell: longer range, more capacity, and plenty of space for more guns. In December, Gunn removed the bombardier and nose guns from B-25C and installed 50 calibers in the nose, for more in external cheek pods, and even rotated the top turret to fire forward. 10 guns, all pointing ahead. Then he added 2 more on each side for a total of 14 forward-firing guns, dumping 215 pounds of lead every second. Ground crews called the project Pappy's Folly. If you want to see how Pappy's impossible gunship turned out, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps this channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more forgotten stories like this. Back to Pappy. Gunn flew the prototype to Charters Towers to show the 3rd Attack Group. The plane was so nose-heavy it tried to drop out of the sky during takeoff. He had to haul back on the stick just to keep it level. But once airborne, the B-25 became a flying destroyer. Kenney immediately ordered 12 more conversions. The 81st Air Depot Group in Townsville worked 18-hour days converting every available B-25. By February 1943, they had 30 strafers ready for action. Then Kenney sent the blueprints to Wright Field in Ohio. Army Air Force's engineers studied the design for 3 days and sent a message back. The modifications were unsafe, the balance was wrong, the aircraft would be too heavy, and all modified B-25s should be grounded immediately. Kenney received the message while he was in Washington. He stepped into General Arnold's office, where the Wright Field engineers were waiting to argue their case. Kenney told them that 12 of the impossible bombers had just played a decisive part in destroying a Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. Every transport sunk, and another 60 were already being converted. Arnold practically chased the engineers out of his office. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea began with intelligence intercepts on February 28, 1943. Allied codebreakers in Melbourne decrypted Japanese naval messages. A convoy was leaving Rabaul. 8 transports, 8 destroyer escorts, and nearly 7,000 troops headed for La on the north coast of New Guinea. Kenny had 72 hours to stop them. The convoy would cross the Bismarck Sea, 400 miles of open water. Japanese commanders believed the monsoon weather would protect them. March meant low clouds, heavy rain, and miserable visibility. Allied bombers couldn't strike what they couldn't find. They were right about the weather. But they were wrong about the bombers. On March 2nd, reconnaissance aircraft finally spotted the convoy pushing south through the Vichy Strait. The B-17 flying fortresses made their run from 15,000 feet, dropping through gaps in the clouds. They released 137 bombs, and crews reported several hits. But when the smoke cleared, the truth was blunt: nothing had sunk. High-altitude bombing simply couldn't stop moving ships. And the Japanese convoy just kept pushing forward. That night, the enemy vessels split up. The transports hugged the New Guinea shoreline while destroyers spread out to guard the formation. Japanese commanders expected to reach La by dawn on March 4th, unload their troops under the protection of fighter cover, and tilt the New Guinea campaign in their favor. They had no idea what was waiting for them when the sun came up. At Port Moresby on the evening of March 2nd, Captain Ed Larner briefed the 92nd Bomb Squadron. The strike package would include 12 B-25 strafers, 30 modified A-20 Havocs, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters for high cover, and P-38 Lightnings to keep Japanese Zeros off their backs. The plan was aggressive. The strafers would come in at mast height, barely 50 feet above the water, firing at nearly point-blank distance. Hit the ships hard, overwhelm the deck gunners, skip bombs into their hulls, and get out before enemy fighters arrived. Larner had practiced this exact tactic only once. His navigator asked him what they'd do if they took fire during the approach. Larner shrugged and said they'd find out the next day. The briefing wrapped up at 2,200 hours. Not a single crewman slept. At 6:30 on March 3rd, the strike force formed up over Cape War Hunt, 137 aircraft in total. The B-17s would attack first from above, drawing anti-aircraft fire upward. Then the low-level killers would sweep in. The convoy sat roughly 70 miles northwest of La when the B-17s arrived. They dove through broken cloud cover while the transports fired everything they had skyward. Black bursts of flak filled the air. One bomber took damage and had to turn back, but the rest pushed their attack home. Then came the strafers. Larner brought the B-25s in from the southeast, skimming the waves. With 14 forward-firing guns per aircraft, that meant 168. 50 caliber guns blasting from just 12 planes, a massive wall of fire nearly 300 yards wide. Aboard the transport Kyakusei Maru, lookouts spotted the formation at 2 miles. The captain swung the ship hard to starboard, but the maneuver came too late. The B-25s opened fire at 800 yards. Streams of 50 caliber rounds ripped across the water and tore into the ship's upper works, smashing the bridge and wiping out the gunners before they could swing their weapons around. 3 B-25s released their bombs at just 100 yards. The first skipped off the waves and punched through the hull into the engine room before exploding. The second slammed into the midsection. The third skipped wide. Within half a minute, the Kyakusei Maru was burning, leaning to port, and dead in the water. It sank about 40 minutes later. And that was only the first target. The transport Tio Maru tried to outrun the attack. Its captain pushed the engines to their limit, 15 knots. But the strafers were closing at 240 knots. There was no contest. 4 B-25s boxed the ship in from both sides. Their gunfire chewed through the decks. Anti-aircraft crews fell where they stood, the bridge windows shattered, and the executive officer was hit multiple times. The captain survived a few seconds longer before a burst cut him down. The strafers dropped 8 bombs. 5 found their mark. The ship cracked apart, and many soldiers trapped below never reached the surface. Tio Maru went under in 6 minutes. Survivors who leapt into the sea were dragged under by their heavy gear. Elsewhere, Australian Beaufighters raked the destroyer Shikanami as it tried to shield the transports. Although its gunners managed to hit one of the Beaufighters, the Australian pilot stayed on target and swept the deck from bow to stern. By the time the B-25s roared in, Shikanami had no functional defense left. 3 strafers attacked from separate angles. The destroyer tried to maneuver into their path, but couldn't turn quickly enough. Bombs struck the port side, starboard side, and midships. The vessel didn't sink right away, but it was finished. Fires raging, engines dead, crew abandoning ship 2 hours later. By 0900 on March 3rd, the Japanese formation was in total disarray across 40 square miles of ocean. 5 transports were sinking or aflame. 2 destroyers were crippled. The remaining ships tried to make a run for La. They didn't get far. The strafers came back at 1,400 hours to finish the job. The second wave hit with fresh bombs and fully loaded guns, and the Japanese had no air cover at all. Their Zero fighters had landed at La to refuel, so when the attack began, they were literally sitting on the ground. The transport Iro Maru was the first to take the punishment. It absorbed a dozen bomb hits, and then its ammunition magazine went up. The blast was so massive that people in Port Moresby, more than 130 miles away, reported seeing the flash. When the smoke drifted off, the ship had simply vanished. No wreckage. No survivors. In an instant, nearly 1,800 Japanese soldiers were gone. Captain Ed Larner brought his strafer in low over another transport, the Oawa Maru. His co-pilot counted at least 14 fires burning across the deck. Japanese troops were already throwing themselves into the sea. The anti-aircraft guns weren't firing anymore. Larner's bombardier dropped 2 bombs at nearly point-blank distance, and both connected. The ship settled by the stern, rolled, and flipped over. Meanwhile, the modified A-20 Havocs were hunting down the crippled Japanese destroyers. One of them, the Asashio, had slowed to rescue men from the water. 3 A-20s swept in from different angles. The destroyer's crew, focused on hauling survivors aboard, didn't even spot the attackers until the guns opened up. Bombs smashed into the forecastle and the bridge. Asashio burned through the night and finally slipped under just after dawn on March 4th. By the evening of March 3rd, the entire convoy had been wiped out. 8 transports at the bottom. 4 destroyers sunk. Out of almost 7,000 troops that left Rabaul, fewer than 1,200 reached La. Another 2,700 were pulled from the water and shipped back to Rabaul. The rest died in the Bismarck Sea. Allied losses were remarkably light. 4 aircraft, 1 B-17 and 3 P-38s, and 13 airmen killed. General MacArthur called it one of the most complete and annihilating combats of all time. Japan never again tried to reinforce New Guinea by convoy. And the turning point came from one idea: Paul Gunn's impossible gunship. Back in Australia, engineers at Wright Field were still preparing a formal report explaining why the B-25 modifications should have been impossible. Before they finished, General Kenny sent a message to General Hap Arnold on March 5th. The subject line was simple: Commerce Destroyer Modifications Approved for Production. The message itself was just one paragraph. 12 B-25 strafers had taken apart an entire Japanese convoy. He requested immediate integration of the forward gun package into all B-25 production aircraft. Arnold phoned North American Aviation President J.H. Dutch Kindleberger that same afternoon. Kindleberger said his team needed to examine the field modifications for themselves. Arnold replied that he'd send the man who designed them. So Paul Gunn was ordered to California. He didn't want to go. His wife, Pauline, and their 4 kids were still trapped in the Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila, captive since January 1942, going on 14 months. Every mission he flew brought him one step closer to the Philippines. Heading to California felt like going the wrong way. But Kenny made it a direct order. The 5th Air Force needed factory-built strafers, hundreds of them, and Gunn was the only man who could show North American how to make them properly. Kenny promised he'd be back in the Pacific in 6 weeks. Gunn arrived in Long Beach, California on March 27, 1943. The North American plant sprawled across 140 acres, with 20,000 workers running non-stop on 3 shifts. A brand new B-25 rolled off the line every 4 hours. The engineers studied Gunn's sketches. They asked for stress calculations. He told them he didn't have any. They asked about wind tunnel data. He said his test was flying the thing in combat. They asked how he fixed the nose-heavy balance. He showed them where he'd relocated the radio gear to the rear. One engineer said the cheek gun mounts would tear the fuselage skin. The .50 caliber muzzle blast would peel the aluminum. Gunn agreed it did, and then showed them the blast tubes he'd welded on to extend past the propeller arc issue resolved. The factory team spent 2 weeks reverse engineering every field modification into proper production designs. They reinforced the nose, redesigned the mounts, strengthened the skin with thicker aluminum panels, and recalculated the center of gravity shift with updated tail trim settings. The first factory-built B-25G Strafer rolled off the line on May 10, 1943. It carried 4 .50 caliber guns in the solid nose and a 75mm M4 cannon, the same gun used in the M3 Lee tank. One hit from that cannon could blow a hole in a destroyer at the waterline. Gunn took the prototype up himself. Firing the cannon forced the gun back 4 feet. The whole plane shook. The navigator had to reload each shell by hand, 1 shot every 30 seconds. Gunn told the engineers it'd work fine against ships, but not much else. North American built 400 B-25G models. Then they refined the design again. The B-25H added 4 more. 50 caliber guns in the cheek packs, 8 guns in the nose, 4 in the cheeks, plus the turret that could rotate forward. By this point, the forward-firing B-25s were packing 14 guns. The H model kept the massive 75mm cannon but upgraded the recoil system, letting the navigator reload faster, 1 shot every 20 seconds. Then came the B-25J, which ditched the cannon entirely and added 4 more 50 caliber guns, bringing the total to 18 forward-firing weapons, making it the most heavily armed production bomber ever built. North American Aviation cranked out 4,900 of these J models, sending the first units to the Pacific in October 1943. Paul Gunn finally returned to Australia in May, 6 weeks exactly after leaving. His family was still trapped in Manila. Meanwhile, the strafers didn't slow down. In April 1943, they wiped out 16 Japanese barges carrying troops and supplies near Finschhafen. May saw them sinking 12 cargo vessels at Waiwak Harbor. June, they hit the oil installations at Balikpapan on Borneo. The Japanese stopped moving supplies during daylight, but it didn't help. The strafers adapted. They learned to strike at night using radar, perfected skip bombing from just 50 feet in total darkness, and coordinated with PT boats that illuminated targets with searchlights at the last second. The Japanese called these planes Black Death, and the nickname fit perfectly. On November 2, 1943, Major Ben Fridge led 4 squadrons of strafers into Rabaul Harbor, 137 aircraft total, including 59 B-25s. The harbor held 38 Japanese vessels, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, cargo ships, minesweepers. Flying at masthead height through clouds of phosphorus smoke, the strafers hit from multiple angles simultaneously. The Japanese couldn't track them all. Within 15 minutes, 30 ships had been struck, 5 sunk immediately, 12 rendered unusable, the rest limping away. Rabaul Harbor was effectively destroyed as a supply base. Gunn flew that mission himself. At 44 years old, he didn't have to be in the air. He was a special projects officer at headquarters, but his family's captivity in Manila gave him a personal mission. Every sortie brought him 1 step closer to them. The conditions in Santo Tomas internment camp were worsening. Food rations were cut, medicine ran out, and prisoners were dying from malnutrition and disease. The Japanese camp commander warned the Red Cross that all prisoners would be executed if Allied forces approached Manila. Gunn told General Kenny he wanted to fly the first strike over Manila during liberation, and Kenny promised him he would. Through 1944, the strafers kept evolving. Some carried 8 5-inch high-velocity rockets under the wings. Others carried napalm tanks. Some carried parafrag bombs, small fragmentation bombs with parachutes, allowing extremely low-level drops without damaging the B-25 itself. The most devastating tactic combined forces. B-24 Liberators would bomb from 20,000 feet, forcing defenders to look up, while the B-25s swooped in low. By the time the gunners looked down, the strafers were already on top of them. In the first 8 months of 1944, 5th Air Force strafers destroyed 947 Japanese aircraft on the ground, sank 273 ships, and killed an estimated 38,000 Japanese troops. Paul Gunn continuously tweaked the planes in the field, adding extra fuel tanks for range, improving gun cooling systems, and developing faster ammo loading techniques. Some modifications existed nowhere else because he'd invented them the night before a mission. Other theaters soon wanted the same planes. Kenny sent them the blueprints, and strafers were adapted for anti-shipping missions in the Mediterranean and to attack supply lines along the Burma Road in the China-Burma-India theater. What Gunn had proved in Brisbane spread to every combat zone. By October 20, 1944, American forces landed at Leyte in the Philippines, setting the stage for Manila's liberation 3 months later. Gunn's family had been captive nearly 3 years. Flying multiple missions every day, he told his crew chief he wouldn't stop until his family was free. Then, disaster struck. On November 27, 1944, at 3:30, Japanese bombers hit Tacloban airfield. 56 Mitsubishi G4M Bettys escorted by Zeros, attacking from low altitude. Radar operators spotted them too late. Gunn was in the operations tent reviewing mission plans when the first bombs fell. The tent was just 200 yards from the main runway. The blast wave threw him off his feet. Shrapnel tore through the canvas. One fragment tore into his left leg, another into his shoulder. The medics found him trying to stand, blood soaking through his flight suit. He barely hesitated. "I need to check my planes," he told them. The doctors told him he needed surgery. Gunn made it just 30 feet before collapsing. He was rushed to the hospital at Leyte. The leg wound was severe. Shrapnel had torn through an artery. The surgeon said it would be at least 6 months before he could fly again, probably longer. The injuries technically qualified him for medical retirement. He was 45, with 26 years of service split between the Navy and the Army. He had every right to go home. But Gunn refused. "Not until my family is free," he told the doctors. The Battle of Manila began on February 3, 1945. American forces fought street by street, house by house. The Japanese had declared Manila a fortress, determined to defend every block. The fighting was savage. But on that same day, Sto. Tomas internment camp was liberated. 3,700 Allied prisoners walked out alive. Gunn's wife, Polly, weighed just 89 pounds, his daughter Julia, 63. They'd survived on a single meal of rice and vegetable soup a day for the past year. His son Nathaniel was sick with malaria, his youngest daughter struggling with dysentery. Still, they were alive. Against medical orders, Gunn flew to Manila on February 4th. His leg was still bandaged, he walked with a cane. The doctors had cleared him only for light duty, no combat flying. But he wasn't thinking about orders. He went straight to Sto. Tomas. When he arrived at the makeshift army hospital, Polly didn't recognize him. 3 years of war had taken their toll. He'd lost 40 pounds since April 1942, and his hair had turned completely gray. She thought he was a doctor at first. Then he whispered her name, and she knew. The official report recorded it simply: Colonel Paul I. Gunn reunited with his family at Sto. Tomas on February 4, 1945. They stayed together for 4 hours before Gunn returned to Leyte. His medical leave wasn't over, but the war was still raging. The modified B-25s kept flying, other crews, same deadly gun modifications. By the war's end, North American aviation had built 9,600 B-25 Mitchell bombers. Almost 5,000 were the strafer variants, packed with forward-firing guns based on Gunn's original designs. Those planes sank more than 800 Japanese ships, destroyed over 2,000 aircraft on the ground, and killed an estimated 85,000 enemy soldiers. The impossible commerce destroyer concept had become the deadliest anti-shipping weapon in the Pacific theater. Gunn never flew another combat mission. The leg wound had ended his operational career. The Army retired him as a full colonel on June 30, 1948, citing medical disability. He was 48. After the war, he returned to the Philippines and rebuilt Philippine Airlines, the company he had founded before the conflict. Operations resumed in 1946 with just 3 war-surplus C-47 transports. He connected Manila, Cebu, Davao, and other major cities, rebuilding an airline that had once relied on only 5 small Beechcraft planes into a network spanning the entire archipelago. In 1947, the Philippine government personally awarded him the Distinguished Service Star. President Manuel Roxas presented the medal, citing extraordinary heroism and exceptional service to the Republic of the Philippines during the Liberation Campaign. Gunn's aircraft modifications had directly helped defeat Japanese forces and liberate the Filipino people. The U.S. military had already decorated him, Distinguished Flying Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, Silver Star, Legion of Merit, Air Medal, and 9 Purple Hearts. A recommendation for the Distinguished Service Cross was never approved. Some officers considered his contributions technical rather than tactical. They were wrong. General Kenny wrote in his memoir, "Papy Gunn was the most valuable man in the 5th Air Force. His mechanical genius and combat innovations changed the course of the war in the Southwest Pacific. Without his strafer modifications, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea would have been a Japanese victory. Without Bismarck Sea, we would have lost New Guinea. Without New Guinea, the road to the Philippines would have been impossible." Even General MacArthur acknowledged him. In a classified July 1945 letter to the War Department, MacArthur recommended Gunn for promotion to Brigadier General. The promotion was denied, the Army Air Force was downsizing, and promotions were frozen. Gunn never complained. He had achieved what mattered most. His family was safe, the Philippines were free, and Japan had been defeated. That was enough. Philippine Airlines continued to expand throughout the late 1940s and into the 1950s, a lasting legacy of the man who had fought on the front lines and from behind the guns to see his country and his family liberated. After the war, Gunn kept building Philippine Airlines. He acquired DC-3s, then DC-4s, and later Convair 340s. Routes expanded to Hong Kong, Bangkok, Singapore. By 1956, PAL was flying all the way to San Francisco. His small inter-island airline had grown into an international carrier. Gunn was constantly in the air, Manila to Cebu, Cebu to Davao, Davao to Hong Kong. He couldn't stop. The war had taught him that movement meant survival. Standing still could mean death. Some pilots said Gunn was still fighting, still outrunning something, maybe memories of STO, Tomas, or the faces of the men who'd flown his modified aircraft and never returned. Then, on October 10, 1957, Gunn boarded a Beechcraft Model 18 twin-engine plane for a routine flight from Manila to Baguio, just 140 miles north. Weather forecasts had predicted scattered thunderstorms over the Cordillera Mountains, nothing severe. He filed his flight plan at 8 o'clock, with a departure at 9:30 and expected arrival at 11 o'clock. The tower cleared him for takeoff at 9:28. But the weather turned quickly. By 10:30, the mountains were swallowed in heavy rain, low visibility, and turbulence. At 10:47, the Beechcraft's radio went silent. Search and rescue teams found the wreckage 3 days later on a mountainside near Baguio. The plane had flown into a storm cell. Attempts to climb above it failed. The wind slammed the aircraft into the ridge. Everyone aboard died instantly. Paul Irvin Gunn passed away on October 11, 1957, just a week shy of his 58th birthday. The Philippines gave him a state funeral. 6,000 people attended, including American veterans, PAL employees, and former STO. Tomas prisoners. General Kenny sent a wreath from the United States. The Manila Times ran his obituary on October 12, headlined, "War Hero Dies in Plane Crash." It noted his Distinguished Flying Cross, his role in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, and his missions over the Philippines, but numbers alone couldn't capture his impact. Official statistics were staggering. 5,000 B-25 strafers built with his modifications, 800 Japanese ships sunk, over 2,000 aircraft destroyed on the ground, and an estimated 85,000 enemy soldiers killed. But the true legacy went further. Gunn had revolutionized air combat. Before him, bombers dropped ordnance from high altitude. After him, bombers became multi-role weapons, strafing, skip bombing, close air support. Modern attack aircraft trace their lineage to his innovations: the AC-130 gunship in Vietnam, the A-10 Warthog, and every forward-firing attack plane today. In 1948, North American Aviation hired him as a consulting engineer. He worked on the B-25 Tornado jet bomber, advising on gun mounting systems and forward-firing armament packages. He earned well but donated most of it to veteran organizations. His son, Nathaniel, followed in his footsteps, joining the Air Force, flying B-52s in Vietnam, retiring as a colonel, and later writing a book about his father titled Papy Gunn, published in 1994. Most people have never heard of Paul Gunn. But some artifacts preserve his legacy. The National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas, displays one of his original gun mounting sketches, 450 caliber guns in an A-20 nose, measurements penciled by hand. No stress calculations, no computers, just a drawing that ultimately killed thousands in the Bismarck Sea. In 2008, the Air Force Association inducted Gunn into the Enlisted Heritage Hall in Washington. The citation recognized his innovations, combat record, and influence on modern attack aviation. 3 of his grandchildren attended the ceremony. Today, Philippine Airlines flies to 42 destinations across Asia, Australia, and North America. In its Manila headquarters, a portrait of Gunn hangs in the main lobby, though many employees don't know who he is. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every single like helps YouTube share these forgotten stories. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We rescue stories every day about people like Paul Gunn, whose field modifications saved thousands of lives. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from: United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, the Philippines? Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer, you're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us your location, tell us if someone in your family served, and just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Papi Gunn, and heroes like him, don't disappear into silence.